You know, we've been asking you this question after Pat Lynch's comments about the blood on the hands and going directly to Mayor de Blasio as it relates to it. And we got a lot of reaction. I want to read just a sample of some of the comments that we got. Let's bring up the first one here if we could. Julio said, no, if the truth hurts, Mr. Mayor, resign. Next comment here coming from Catherine, who says, Pat Lynch is a spokesman for law enforcement. It's his job to spin a situation. Giselle says, no. Speaking of Mr. Lynch saying he's right, somebody has to wear the pants in this city. It's obviously not the mayor. Owen saying apparently Pat Lynch is named for Lynch for a reason. The PBA doesn't seem capable of de-escalating itself, much less volatile situations involving our citizens every day. Lynch's scapegoating of Mayor de Blasio and everyone else lurking in the vicinity is a disgraceful overreaction. PBA members should be embarrassed by the childish insubordination shown to the mayor and turning their backs to him in public. Well, thank you. Again, it's a sampling of the reaction. And again, there's the question. We're going to ask it again tonight here, so keep the comments coming. And again, for those who didn't see it, here's a look here at that scene before PBA Lynch's comments there as Bill de Blasio entered Woodhull, the facility there in Queens on Saturday morning. It'll be fascinating this Friday, and we'll be awake, and Saturday will be the actual services where they lay Officer Ramos to rest. His family, the Ramos family, has welcomed Mr. de Blasio. It'll be interesting the reception he gets for the police, who will turn out in huge force as they do whenever an officer is lost in the line of duty. Okay, the backlash the mayor is facing it does not seem to be abating, and a lot of others question whether there could be some other long-term issues in terms of that fractured relationship down the line. We're going to get into a lot of legal issues tonight, but I want to also get the perspective of these guys here because, as I said, they're now on the defense side, but they used to be on the prosecution side. Let's bring them in. Familiar faces by now. Mayo Bartlett, attorney and former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, and selected as one of Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation, and also a former ADA out on Long Island. All right, when you see this play out, guys, and Doug, let's start with you. What is it that concerns you more than the bellicose language and the yelling back and forth? What worries you when you see a police department and a mayor that seem to be so at odds in obviously a very tense situation that doesn't have a period at the end of it, because this thing's still unfolding?
Well, what worries me is you have two different departments that have very difficult jobs to do without having a political issue among the two of them. And now will this interfere with what they have to do? Because at the end of the day, these police officers have to get out there and do their jobs, as well as the mayor and the mayor's office. This isn't going to help anybody, especially not going to help the people.
In Mayo, I was saying before, it's not just a few cops. I'm hearing rank and file. They had it before even these officers were killed. They feel that it's been abandoned by the mayor. Whether that's fair or not isn't almost the point. But what shocked me wasn't just the language of Lynch and the reception that they gave him, but they're deciding, or there's memos going around whether or not they want to have petitions he's allowed to show up at officers' funerals. This is before the two officers shot. And then they were talking about policing as to whether or not they're going to go out with one squad car or two to respond to every incident. You can't run a city, let alone a police department, where people on the fly are kind of deciding what they will and they won't do.
Well, I think you hit it on the head, though. Number one, it comes down to running the police department, and the police themselves don't run that department. That department's run by the commissioner and by the mayor. And when you stop and think about having police officers turn their back to the mayor, can you imagine soldiers turning their back on Patton? Can you imagine any soldiers turning their back on George W. Bush, whether they voted for him and agree with the war or not, they didn't, or turning their back on Obama? Once you do that, you're reaching a level of insubordination which almost suggests that the department is becoming fractured to the point of being broken. And unfortunately, the bigger issue, as Doug and I were talking about earlier, is that we are suffering right now from a culture of violence in our country across the board. Doesn't matter what your race is, it doesn't matter what your occupation is, it's a culture of violence. This is an opportunity really for protesters who are protesting violent deaths of African American men, and again, as we've said many, many times on this show, people who are of all backgrounds, white young men and women as well. This is an opportunity to embrace the families of these officers and to talk about violence across the board.
I was a little surprised, Mayo, today that the mayor publicly all but pleaded with the protesters to stand down till at least the wake and the services this weekend happened for Officer Ramos and Officer Liu, and they waited only 24 hours and they're back out today. We showed a live shot at the top of the hour right on Madison Avenue, and it's not helping matters out here. I understand that we have a situation that still has not resolved itself, and there's an open debate about what policing should look like in the process in this country, and strive for some kind of equity regardless of background or color. That hasn't been resolved. But the fact that the mayor couldn't even get them to stand down till Saturday, and they don't report to the mayor, and I get this, right? That in itself is a sign here that there are so many different moving agendas going on simultaneously right now. It is a real challenge, but I wanted to get your guys' take on that. Okay. There was a piece of news that kind of flew under the radar right now, but it's a story we all covered quite a bit. Embattled Congressman Michael Grimm pleading guilty in a federal tax evasion case. Grimm pleading guilty on one count of aiding in filing a false tax return. His sentencing set for June 8th. You got a sense here what he's looking at? Forget the politics for a minute. Criminally, he only pled to one of the charges that he was looking at. Pled guilty here. For people to say, oh, wow, he pled guilty. Did he actually, could he actually be coming out of this smelling pretty good, or is he in trouble because of what he's basically looking at
Well,
now?
I don't think you can plead guilty to a felony charge and come out looking good, especially as an elected official. But it looks like there was a meeting of the minds between the prosecutors and his attorneys. He didn't plead to more. They agreed on what he was going to plead to. I think they probably have an idea of what he's going to be sentenced to, and I think that was probably why he took the plea deal in the beginning. But, you know,
And what do you think it would look like?
You know what? I have no idea. Because what's important with an elected official, a congressman, is that he is acknowledging guilt. He's pleading guilty to a felony. That's really probably what the prosecutor's office was most interested in.
Yeah.
Not really the time he'd spend or whatever. But he's pled guilty to a significant charge.
And like I said, you've been a prosecutor before. The fact that there's a guilty plea to a felony, it's not almost secondary, but then the political questions come in. Now there's pressures here on his ultimate boss in the House, which is Speaker Boehner, whether or not he'll call for his resignation or not, and the wheels that'll turn there. But in and of itself, is that kind of when the prosecutors are doing the math here, they're trying to figure out, you know what, we get him to plead guilty to one. It's almost not as important as to what happens with the other charges here, because it's the message that's sent.
Well, there shouldn't be, and that's part of the reason that there's distrust of the system across the board, because there are different standards depending on who you happen to be. And if you are a former FBI agent, you are a congressman, and you have tax evasion to the tune of $1 million, there's a question, is that enough for you simply to be shamed by having a federal conviction? But if that's the case, what about the person who's running a bagel shop someplace and has a tax evasion case for $10,000? That person's likely to go to jail, or more likely to go to jail. So these are some of the things. But again, you can look, and there are a number of his colleagues in Congress who have felony convictions and continue to work, and they get reelected by their constituents.
But Rich, also, you know, he was elected this time. This was all out in the open. The people that elected him from his jurisdiction, they knew this was probably a likely outcome. I mean, he wasn't saying that I'm going to fight this to the end trial. He was kind of dealing with it, saying, you know, if I can't serve.
But he did deny it. And what I took a major issue, Doug, and I'm coming at it not from the legal, but from the public affairs standpoint, is I always thought the people of Staten Island got a raw deal in this, although they knowingly knew this wasn't a secret. This was out there. Certainly, Recchio, who is his general election opponent, tried pushing this as an issue. But at the end of the day, if Grimm knew that there was at least a decent chance, if not a good chance, that he was going to take a plea to something, the campaign amounted to nothing more than him trying to get leverage with the prosecutors to say, hey, you want me? I got a lot more to bargain with if I'm a sitting congressman than if I just lost the election or if I resigned outright. Because then I think he's got more. Now if he says, you want me to have a protracted fight here? You want this all to play out? Or do you want me to resign from Congress? Fine, but that's a chip that I'm going to use, so I'm never going to go serve any jail time. And to me, that's where I think the process gets a little perverted.
But for the U.S. Attorney's Office, that's a prolonged fight that they're going to win, most likely. And so what happens
But do
is...
they want to fight it if they can avoid it? If he'll resign, they'll get a pelt on the wall.
But there's no downside for them fighting this case, and it's an easy enough case for them to prosecute. Either he's able to defend it or he's not. And the other issue is that, you know, we're looking at what we haven't talked about is campaign finance. So what happens to all the money that goes to Mr. Grimm when he's running? So basically, in one form or another, he keeps that money. So there's a whole other reason why you continue to run. It's not necessarily that you think you're going to win.
Maybe use some of that money for his legal bills. Yeah. Okay. When we come back, everybody, we're going to take a look at the law in social media. I've been meaning to ask these guys this week after week here, and finally, I think I got a good reason to do it. New York politician from Doug's neck of the woods accused of following a porn star online, saying it wasn't him. Somebody else hacked his account. Sound familiar? How can such an argument actually hold up? Not that he's accused of breaking the law here, but this isn't just about embarrassment. Sometimes people say it wasn't me. Is that enough in the internet age? We'll get into that after this.